Okay, great. We're delighted tonight to have Meg Morgan, the campaign manager at the Cumberland at Route Nashville at the Cumberland River Compact. And she'll explain more about this much better than I can, but Route Nashville is a public-private partnership led by the Cumberland River Compact and Metro Nashville. And their main goal is to plant 500,000 trees by the year 2050. That sounds like a big number, but if you think about the population of Davidson County, it's around 700,000. And so 500,000 is probably just everybody over 21. So we just need to get everybody, every adult in Davidson County to plant a tree, and we've got it done. So I'll let Meg talk more about that strategy. I'm sure it's different than the one I just proposed. But Meg, we're delighted to have you here tonight. And so I'm going to turn everything over to you, and you can correct everything I just said.
Well, I will say this, I won't correct that I am also delighted to be here. So thank you so much for the invitation, Richard, and for the opportunity to be here. I'm a member of Wild Ones also, love to listen in and participate whenever possible. Usually join the Zoom meetings saying Meg and Parker because my husband likes to listen in with me. So what an honor and a pleasure to be here kind of as a speaker and presenter. So like Richard was saying, my name is Meg Morgan, and I am the Route Nashville campaign manager at the Cumberland River Compact. And so we are going to be talking trees tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, if I may, Richard. It looks like it is currently disabled. If you wouldn't mind, turn that on for me. I can kind of get warmed up while you're doing that. I think it's by the green share screen. You should have a little arrow down. There we go. I think everyone can hear me okay. Can now everyone see this okay? Seeing some nods, beautiful. All right, so it's tree night. We're talking about the benefits of trees and the Route Nashville campaign. So I'm going to start with a little bit of drama here, and it is true drama, unfortunately, and that is that we are losing trees as a city, significant amount. We're losing the majority of these trees to development and to growth. That's thousands of trees every year to that. You know, that development and growth has really made Nashville the city that it is today. Part of the reason, you know, I moved here in 2014. I'm not from Nashville, but it was a cool happening place to be. So wanted to be here. So I'm part of this too, but that means that we're losing trees because of that growth. We're also losing trees because we have an aging canopy in Nashville. We also have the emerald ash borer. I bet everybody in this group is familiar with that pesky little invasive beetle that is here to kill all of our native ash trees. It's estimated that in Nashville, we have about 5% of our canopy is ash. That in itself is going to make a huge difference. It's expected we're going to see the peak of the death curve. It's a horrifying way to put it, but we're really going to start noticing that within the next few years, the loss of our ash trees. So it also doesn't help when we have tornadoes and when we have derecho wind events. You know, in 2020, we had both. So all of these things combined are really contributing to the fact that we are losing trees as a city. Even before the storms, in really just a few short years from 2008 to about 2017, we lost 13% of our canopy in Nashville in urban areas, mostly to these reasons. And again, that was even before the tornado and the derecho. We should care about the fact that we're losing so many trees because trees provide us with so many benefits and in so many different categories as well. So of course, trees benefit the environment and our land, but we're a part of that too. I think this group is a group of people who really understands that as well. When we say the environment, when we say nature, we're a part of that too. And I say we as humans and people. So our tree canopy is really closely tied to our own health as individuals, as people as well. So I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but this image on the far left over here is a map of average daytime temperatures in Davidson County. So this is a map of Nashville. And as you can imagine, the redder the image, the hotter it is. And this is a picture of something that's called the urban heat island effect. And it's a little bit self-explanatory, right? Of a heat island, you can see this downtown Nashville right here in the middle, how much hotter that is showing up to be than the areas outside around it that are more wooded, that have more trees. So this, of course, has really big environmental impacts as well as health impacts for us as people too. So we'll get into some of the health benefits as well. That's something I was really excited to talk to this group about in particular, because I know this is plant people, this is earth people, environmental people, but there's some really surprising benefits of trees outside of those things as well. But let's start there. Let's start with the environmental aspect of this. So when we talk about benefits of trees, I think this is maybe what people think of in the first place about the different benefits and why trees are good for cities, good for landscapes, and that is that they have so many different benefits for our land, for our environment. And I want to start with water in particular. Water is really closely tied to urban tree canopy in a couple different ways. This one kind of single graphic shows a lot of the different processes and, scientific systems that are in place that a single tree can handle with water as it's flowing and falling in rainfall. So just by the fact of being there, the tree kind of slows down water as it falls, slows down that rainfall. And that can really help filter our stormwater and really help prevent flooding as well. Just the fact of it being there and kind of slowing down that water, even before you take into the effect that the roots are soaking up that moisture as well. And then through a process known as evapotranspiration, very big, fancy scientific word, the tree is kind of breathing back some of this moisture into the air, but in a slower way. So this is why trees are a really important, it's known as green infrastructure strategy, really important for stormwater management. We'll get into the Root Nashville campaign here in a little bit, but this right here is a big reason why our local water department, Metro Water Services, is a really key committed partner in the Root Nashville campaign. And it's because trees do so much for filtering our stormwater. They clean that water even before it gets to the waterways and prevent flooding. So as said, that is a big strategy you can do to actually prevent flooding is planting trees for all of those different reasons. But in particular, this is something that we in Nashville and in Middle Tennessee should be thinking about maybe even more because of climate change. So with climate change, there's many different effects that are unfortunately going to unfold from that. But in Middle Tennessee in particular, it is predicted that we are going to see more extreme rainfall events and more flooding because of this. That warmer air means that there's more evaporating more quickly, right? And then that condenses then again in the atmosphere and means more precipitation. So because of global warming, it might seem counterintuitive, right? You're like, oh, it's just gonna get hotter, right? But actually, it's predicted that here in Middle Tennessee, we're going to see more extreme rainfall events and more flooding. So that's something to keep an eye on. And another really important benefit of trees is that they can help combat some of these things. So kind of continuing the theme of trees and water, trees also help prevent soil erosion. And that is also really important for keeping our streams and our waterways clean and healthy. Like they do with water and with rain as it's falling, they can really act as a windbreak, really slow down that wind as it's blowing. So that really helps prevent kind of surface runoff and surface erosion. Can also help against nutrient depletion in our soils and waterways as well. So that is why we really strongly advocate a riparian buffer, as it's called, along our streams and waterways. I bet this is a term that many of you are familiar with, but a riparian buffer is a kind of strip of green vegetation along waterways. And we recommend that because it helps prevent that soil erosion and really helps keep that waterway strong and healthy. So trees are a really important part for that, really because of that soil erosion prevention really helps keep that soil strong and together. So if y'all have not played with this tool before, I definitely would recommend looking into it a little bit more. So this is something called iCreek, so kind of like an iPod or something. It's just the letter Creek, capital C. And this is a tool through the Cumberland River Compact that shows you what watershed you live in, what your closest stream is, when rain falls on your property, you can look up your own address, where that rain is then draining to. You can see what streams are near you and you can see whether they are healthy, unhealthy, or unassessed. And if they're unhealthy, you can see why they're categorized as unhealthy. Is it because of runoff? Is it because of a certain kind of pollutant? So would definitely recommend looking into that. But I wanted to point this out for trees in particular, because even on this very local tool here in Nashville that's available, you can see that when there is a more wooded area, when there are more trees, the waterways in that area are healthier, and you can see that there are fewer areas that are, marked as unhealthy. So even here, locally on this map, you can really see that very strong tie between when you have more trees, you have healthier waterways. And it's fun, it's interactive. So I definitely recommend you all checking out this resource. So we talked about it very briefly about trees and climate change, but I did kind of want to address it head on as well. So planting trees is what's called a nature-based solution for combating and mitigating climate change. It is not the only thing that needs to happen. We cannot tree plant, as much as I wish that were, the silver bullet solution towards fighting climate change. That's not the only thing that is going to solve this crisis. Will it make a difference? Absolutely. So this is kind of one strategy, in the fight against climate change and global warming is tree planting, but it's not the only thing that needs to be done. And I work at a tree planting campaign. I will admit that this is not, the silver bullet solution. It's not going to solve all of our ills and tribulations, unfortunately, but it absolutely can help for many of the reasons that we are going to be talking about here with benefits. Some of the ones we already talked about. So keeping our streams and waterways healthy, absolutely kind of tied to the fight to mitigate these things. So for this group in particular, you definitely wanted to talk about trees and biodiversity. This is a graphic that is not from the Root Nashville campaign. I liked it for the images, not as much for the words. Prefer to use the words native species or non-native species. It's a little friendlier and less political, I think, than using the kind of charged language of exotic species or indigenous species. So I prefer native or non-native, but this kind of does show the different ways that native species, as you all know, this is a wild ones chapter, the native species really do bring even more benefit to our ecosystems than to trees that are maybe non-native and not from this area. And that's because, as you all know, this is kind of this food web, that you can think of from science classes, maybe in even as way back as elementary school or middle school. The plants, the producers, are always at the bottom of these food webs, right? Trees are just really, really big plants, really, really big producers that then support everything else that comes after that. So when you have more trees in an area, that can then mean that there's more insects that area can support, and so on and so forth. And it just kind of goes all the way up. So trees really do support biodiversity in that way by supporting our insects and then all the other kinds of things that are associated with that. I'm not going to try to explain what Doug Tallamy does so well in an entire book that he recently wrote about it. We also had a book club, the Root Nashville and Wild Ones kind of partnered to talk about his most recent book, The Nature of Oaks. But in this, he kind of walks through the life cycle of a tree, an oak in particular, in a single year. You learn a lot of really interesting things along the way. A lot of it's about bugs. A lot of it's about caterpillars. I know that there's a lot of people on here who are Doug Tallamy fans and advocates big time. So you know the drill with this, but specifically when we're talking about biodiversity, this is really what we're talking about. Like how many species of insects in particular does that tree support? And then the more insects, the more animals it supports, the better, not better, but the more engaged and connected kind of piece of our urban ecosystem it can play. So what we tell people, we are very often talking to members of the public who are not plant people, who are kind of coming into this for the first time and learning along the way. But our advice to them is, if you have room, plant a big tree. You know, if you've got it, go big. The bigger the tree, the more benefits it brings. And if you can, plant an oak. We kind of follow, we do recommend follow the Doug Tallamy rule there, that oaks are really incredible because they do support so many different caterpillars in particular. And again, there's a whole book about that, so I won't get into it. Definitely recommend reading it. I bet a lot of you already have. So that's just the benefits of trees for our environment, right? Kind of the maybe more traditional benefits you might think of with trees, but did want to get into some kind of untraditional benefits of trees as well, kind of some things kind of outside specifically the quote unquote environmental lens. So let's look at some of the benefits a little closer to home, trees in your own neighborhoods. First things first, they increase your property value, maybe even up to 20%. So some studies have shown that if you have mature yard trees in the front part of your landscaping and you've got good trees across your neighborhood and they're mature, look how much, you know, the property value of your home goes up just from having trees there. Well, that's another thing in addition to the environmental feel-good benefits, right? Trees also provide a noise barrier, especially in urban areas. They can also create more privacy in a really, you know, in a living kind of green way, right? So a little bit better than maybe a wall or something else that could be providing the same kind of effect. This is something I love to mention, talking about trees in neighborhoods in particular, because I think it's less well known and less common. And that is that trees can provide traffic calming benefits. So I have the opportunity to attend a lot of different neighborhood meetings with my role in my job, which is probably my favorite part. I love talking about trees with neighborhoods, but we hear about traffic and people speeding all the time in these meetings, right? Like it seems something that is really top of mind for a lot of people. So I know that, you know, safety is first for a lot of those kinds of situations and settings, but I like to say that, you know, actually trees can really help with this too, believe it or not, especially street trees. If you've got them lined up, especially on both sides of the street, kind of creating like a tunnel-like effect. Studies show that people will naturally just drive up to 8 miles per hour slower just from having those street trees on the side of the roads. So that's kind of a benefit that maybe doesn't come to mind immediately when you think about trees being good, trees being beneficial. Another way they can help you out at home is by conserving energy and lowering your bills. So if you've got a tree planted where it can cast shade on your house, that can make it so you don't have to use the air conditioning as often and can reduce your need to turn that on. And then if you've got a deciduous tree, when those leaves fall in the winter, now the sunshine can come through and actually help keep your home warmer. So this is a kind of conservative estimate that it can reduce cost by up to 4%. I've seen studies that show that it can reduce your cost by up to 20% if you're planting the right tree in the right place around your home. Kind of, again, more unusual benefits of trees is that it can help build community in your neighborhood. When you've got a more comfortable, pleasant place to spend time and be outside, it's shown that you're more likely to do so. So if you're spending more time outside, you might see others doing the same. You might pass a wave to your neighbor. You might then get to know that neighbor a little bit, or at least recognize them by sight. Then you're more likely to kind of keep an eye on things, establish trust and relationship with those neighbors, and can kind of build community that way. So kind of, trees are good for us as being neighborly as well. This is something that we often hear the opposite about, is that, you know, I'm not sure about planting trees in that park because people will use it as cover and can, you know, they'll commit more crimes in that area if they can hide behind these trees. But there's actually studies that show just the opposite. Because of the presence of trees in a neighborhood gives the effect that this neighborhood is loved and cared for, kind of naturally shows that they're looking out for each other in this neighborhood. You know, maybe this isn't the place to break into a car or something like that. And again, with that kind of community effect of building community, when you're more likely to be outside and know your neighbors a little bit, that also decreases crime in neighborhoods. They're good for business, of course. So if you kind of look at these pictures from this study of a shopping area that hardly has any trees at all, a shopping area that has some trees, and then a shopping area with the most trees. They kind of showed these pictures to people and said, where would you like to shop? And perhaps unsurprisingly, people chose the one that had more tree cover and more tree canopy. It's also shown that when people are comfortable and the temperatures are cool, it's pleasant to be around, they're more likely to shop for longer and even to spend a little bit more money, believe it or not. So that's benefits in neighborhoods and in homes. But what I am excited to talk with you all about, especially this group, is how trees can benefit your health. And when I say health, I mean talking about public health of people. So first of all, it is being shown more and more that even just being outside, not including or excluding trees, but usually including or excluding trees, even just being outside is really good for you. And now there's an article a couple of years ago that Tennessee doctors can actually now write a prescription that says you need 20 minutes a day of outside, sunshine. It's good for you, go outside and do it. So because trees are also, of course, helping us, provide clean air, there's studies that show that in places that have more street trees, so these are trees that are lining our sidewalks and walkways, areas that have more street trees, asthma attacks decrease, especially in young kids. So then there's a connection between that and with schools and with presence or absence in schools, because asthma keeps kids home a lot. This study was a study from Vanderbilt. It shows that up to a third of absences from school that are medical are because of something related to asthma. So I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that if you have, more street trees in an area, this can cause fewer absentees in school. It can keep kids in school more because asthma attacks will go down. This is that same picture of the average daytime temperatures in Davidson County and a picture of the urban heat island effect. So that has effects, for our environment, of course, but also heat-related illnesses are really serious. Heat-related illnesses and, strokes, things like that, they actually kill more people every year than any other natural disaster, tornadoes, flooding, like you name it. Heat is actually the #1 kind of weather natural disaster related killer. And I think it's kind of, it's been called the silent killer because of that, because, a dramatic event like a tornado or like a flood or something like that, can get a lot of attention, and rightfully so. But at the same time, just more and more often in the summer, we're getting really, really extremely hot days. And that's causing more heat related illnesses, which are really no good for public health. Wanted to show this picture from a little science experiment that we like to do with kids, especially in summertime when it is hot outside. We have little handheld kind of thermometers that you can point it at something and it takes the temperature of what the laser is pointing at. So this is a really easy kind of science experiment we can do with kids, even as young as 5 and 6. We say, okay, take the temperature of the sidewalk over here in the hot sun, chart it on this graph, and then go take the temperature of the ground underneath this tree and see the difference. Like why do you think it's so different? How did it feel to be on the sidewalk versus the tree? So I think that's kind of a visual way that we can really teach this lesson to kids as well. Trees are cool. So they really can, not just decrease the amount of heat related illnesses, but they can kind of keep us safe on a very hyper local level. They really do lower temperatures right outside your door. They also make you feel good. So on the mental health side of things, and I bet this group is something that can really relate to this, even just seeing a tree, you don't even have to be outside, but there are some studies that show that even if you can just see a tree out your window, that reduces your blood pressure, that reduces the release of stress hormones, and it can make you feel a lot better, even if you're not kind of consciously taking it in or looking at that, even when you're inside. If you're just looking at a tree subconsciously from out your window, even that is good for you. So again, kind of with the building community thing as well, when you're, when you have a comfortable place to be outside and to spend time, there are just so many ways that it's shown that's really good for your health. But really, the best part about all of these benefits is that it's not just one of these things, right? You might have your favorite, you might have one that really speaks to you. If you're a bird person, you're like, I love trees because of the habitat, because of the increase in biodiversity. And that's great, and that's amazing. And I would say that's actually how I got into trees originally myself, was through love of birds. But the best part about this is that trees provide all these benefits all at once. So you can have a favorite, but at the same time, they're providing all of these different benefits. And yet, again, we're losing so many trees as a city, right? This is a picture of a replanting we were working on in a tornado affected area. We can see, what had to be taken down, and then, hopefully stems of hope kind of growing up here with these new trees. So the fact that we are losing so many trees, and yet they do provide us with so many benefits, that is why the Root Nashville campaign exists. So we'll get into this a little bit, and then want to make sure there's time at the end for you to ask any and all questions that you might have. But what is Root Nashville? This is an effort to restore our canopy and restore what's being lost. And it's a public-private partnership with a very big goal of planting 500,000 trees within Davidson County by 2050. So what public-private partnership means is that it is co-led by the Cumberland River Compact, which is a nonprofit, and the city of Nashville. So Root Nashville is very much a metro initiative, and it is something that the city of Nashville is behind. But it is kind of led, and the operations are kind of headquartered within the Cumberland River Compact, which is a nonprofit. So I work at the Cumberland River Compact, kind of under the Root Nashville umbrella, but Root Nashville is very much a citywide initiative as well. Everybody can be a part of this big goal. We're planting all over as a campaign and as a city, all over Nashville, all over Davidson County, but we're also focusing plantings in what we call impact areas. So these are our impact areas. The colors do not mean anything except to differentiate the different areas. So we have Madison up here in the north. This is actually where I live. So I'm zooming to you from right about this area right here under that A. Also North Nashville just above downtown, and South Nashville just south of downtown. So these impact areas, the reason we are really focusing efforts in these areas is because of what the data shows. So these are areas that have higher rates of asthma. These are areas that have more impaired or polluted streams. These are areas that have more vulnerable communities that are more susceptible to heat-related illnesses. These are places that are hotter. So we kind of mashed all of this data together and came up with these impact areas, and that will show that this is where trees can really, really make the most difference and impact, and also create a more equitable distribution of trees. Probably most of you are from Nashville, but not everyone. But I bet everyone knows kind of how different it feels in Belle Meade, for example, beautiful, very green place, compared with North Nashville. If you've ever been around kind of TSU area and around the neighborhoods around there, they feel very, very different. And a lot of that is because of the tree canopy cover. They're very different in very different neighborhoods. Some of that is because of history. So unfortunately, there was a practice that was called redlining that took place all the way up until, I want to say, the 70s, unfortunately. But this was a practice where banks kind of outlined certain neighborhoods as undesirable investments, saying like, this is not where you want to give people loans. This is not where you want to invest. And unfortunately, this was a very racist practice because the bankers and institutions were singling out areas that were mostly Black communities and were immigrants, areas that had higher percentages of immigrants and people of color. So because these areas were redlined, so that literally means like drawn, around with red saying like, don't invest here kind of thing. Because of that, the effects of that are still absolutely being felt today. Those neighborhoods, fewer trees were planted in those neighborhoods. So it wasn't just the banks saying, don't invest in this area. There was a lot of clear cutting. There was a lot of impervious surfaces and concrete put in. And now these areas have fewer trees. These neighborhoods have fewer trees. And that means that these neighborhoods are even hotter. So to kind of go back to a slide, if you look at a map of areas that were historically redlined in Nashville, compared to these impact areas, there's unfortunately, and perhaps unsurprisingly, quite a bit of overlap, especially for North Nashville and South Nashville. Madison wasn't completely a part of the consolidated government of Nashville just yet, but this practice does absolutely hold true, unfortunately, for Nashville as well. I know I'm getting a little off from plants in particular, but I know this is a wild one meeting, but I wanted to kind of explain some of the background and why we do what we do and where we do what we do. So what I meant by this being a campaign and a citywide initiative is that no matter who plants a tree in Nashville, it can, and we hope does, count towards this goal of planting 500,000 trees. So this is a snapshot of our tree plotter map, and you can get to this from the Root Nashville website, and it shows all the newly planted trees in the city. So this is a couple days old, so it might not, hopefully there's a few more trees added at this point, but we're at a little over 20,600 trees, and that's as a city. So that's all the trees that the Cumberland River Compact is planting, all the trees from the Tree Foundation, all the trees that the city is planting. They all can count towards this goal. You all in your gardens, in your yards, if you have planted trees since 2018 when the Root Nashville campaign was launched, that also counts towards this goal. So as long as you know about Root Nashville, you know that your trees can count, you can go to the website, you can create a login, and you can add your own newly planted trees to the count. And in fact, we very much encourage you to do so, because everyone can be a part of it and kind of all strive towards this big goal together. There's a lot of different tree planting organizations and departments in Nashville. We are very fortunate in that way that we have so many different groups that kind of work on different angles of this issue. This is really just a snapshot, but these are some of the biggies, or maybe the ones that you are more familiar with than others. And I did want to specifically highlight a couple of these kind of key campaign partners. So in particular, Root Nashville is led by the Cumberland River Compact and by Metro Water Services. We get asked sometimes, like, okay, trees and like water, why is all these water groups, why is a water department, so involved with tree planting? But that was what we talked about, kind of at the beginning of the presentation. There's just a really strong, clear tie between you have to have a strong tree canopy and tree cover if you want to have strong, healthy waterways as well. So the Cumberland River Compact is the kind of headquarters or the operational lead for the campaign. And because we are the nonprofit side of the campaign, we really focus our plantings on private properties in particular. We have a program that I'll talk about here in a few minutes called the Neighborhood Planting Captain Program. And that's really the key way that the Cumberland River Compact is planting trees towards the Root Nashville campaign right now and for the immediate future. Metro Water Services is actually the hub of our urban forestry for Nashville. Again, believe it or not, urban forestry is kind of housed within our water department, but it's because of those stormwater benefits and those flooding prevention benefits. They are generally focused on planting trees on public properties and especially in impact areas, as we are as well with plantings at the Cumberland River Compact. So the city has a horticulturist and an arborist, a whole stormwater department. They work at Metro Water Services, our arborists and our horticulturists do. Other key campaign partners and, tree organizations you might be familiar with are the Nashville Tree Foundation. All the trees that they plant count towards that Root Nashville goal. So we are rooting for them. We want them to plant as many trees as they can. They do a lot on school properties. They have a well-known program called Releafing Day, where they get a bunch of trees planted all in one day. They do giveaways of smaller container trees at farmers markets that y'all might be familiar with. And another key partner is the Nashville Tree Conservation Corps. This is a newer nonprofit. It's been around a couple years now, and their kind of main focus is leading advocacy and policy efforts as related to trees in our urban canopy. The Root Nashville campaign is a public-private partnership with the city. We are planting trees and we have a big goal. We are not on the advocacy or the policy side of things, but we're very fortunate that the Nashville Tree Conservation Corps takes on this angle of the work for Nashville. And I also want to shout out for sure, they have a really great tree sale. At any point in the year, you can order a tree that's then delivered during tree planting season, which is generally October-ish through March-ish, depending on the weather. Really high quality, large trees that are really affordable and delivered right to your door. And again, all those count, we want trees planted no matter who or how or when. So definitely recommend following what these partners are up to as well. So overall, this kind of vision of what the Root Nashville campaign is trying to do, it's kind of nestled in this message that, again, the strength of our tree canopy is really closely tied with our own health and the quality of our natural environment. So our vision with all these trees, why are we planting so many? Why is there this number attached to it? Really, at the end of the day, it's to build a tree canopy for Nashville so that we are more equitable, healthy, and climate resilient in our neighborhoods. So that's the whole reason behind why we're doing what we do, why we're planting so many trees. So to kind of talk about some of the specifics here, some of the nuts and bolts, some things in particular I thought that the Wild Ones attendees might be interested in. Generally in our messaging and when we're trying to reach people, we kind of take a people forward approach. We are trying to get the non-usual suspects engaged in tree planting and interested in getting trees planted on their property. So we generally lead with, messages like, hey, it's going to create clean air for your kids. It's going to create a healthy environment for you as a person. But it's definitely the different messages, the different benefits of trees, different ones resonate in different ways with different people. So for some, it might be, hey, are you a bird watcher? Well, trees, number one habitat and food source, for birds. So if you want more birds to be around, maybe you should think about planting a couple more trees in your yard if you haven't already. So we kind of touch on different types of benefits when talking to the public, talking with people, but generally we go for a person forward approach, people forward. We're unique in that the kind of lead partners of the Root Nashville campaign are focused on creating tree equity. Wow, that's a little bit of a tongue twister, and an equitable canopy distribution in that, yes, we're planting everywhere, but really focused on areas where the trees can have an even greater impact and benefit. The way the campaign is structured, it's something that everybody can be a part of, but it's public-private partnership, nonprofit, government. This is actually a pretty unique structure. The fact that it's very much partnership driven and that it's a citywide effort. So it's unique in that way. It's very focused on urban areas in particular. So there's definitely some very beautiful, kind of more natural wooded settings in Nashville, especially in parks, places like Warner Parks, especially up towards, Whites Creek or Jolton. And those are places where we can and do sometimes plant, but this is very much an effort that is about urban trees and urban forestry. And the Root Nashville campaign is also unique in the fact that we have strategies and programs for both public and private property. A lot of tree initiatives and nonprofits out there, really across the nation, but across kind of the world as well, focus most often on public properties. So the fact that we have this kind of private property strategy makes us a little unique here in Nashville. So I knew, this group in particular would want to hear about the plants themselves, the trees themselves. So we wanted to make sure we had at least a couple minutes to chat about this. This is up for conversation, up for debate. I know there is often sometimes heated or strong opinions about certain types of trees to plant and why some are better than others. But typically on our end anyway, we're planting pretty large trees that are about 1 inch to 1.5 inches caliper, ball and burlap trees. So that's exactly what is pictured here, the Sweet Bay Magnolia. We get them from nurseries in McMinnville, Tennessee. I'm sure many of you are aware that we are fortunate to live quite close to what turns out to be the tree nursery capital of the country. It's just down the road in McMinnville. So if you've ever been down there, as soon as you get off the highway, you can see tree nurseries in every direction, almost as far as the eye can see. So that's where we're sourcing most of our trees. And it's nice that they're in a climate that is and soil that is so similar to what we have here. So we benefit from that as well. And overall on our end, we're planting about 90% native species overall. So almost everything we plant is a native species, not 100%. We're working towards that, a little bit more, I think every season planting a little bit more native, but almost everything we're planting is native. Just very, very quickly, wanted to mention the different types of ways you can get trees and kind of mention some of the differences. There's pros and cons with all of these, but we are typically working with the balled and burlap trees, which looks like this. They're usually field grown from nurseries in McMinnville. And then when they're purchased and when it's time to ship them all the way to Nashville and get them to their new homes here, there's this funky machine that kind of scoops them up out of the ground, kind of wraps them in that burlap package. So they do lose quite a bit of their root mass in that process, but it's not so much that it's detrimental to the very long-term health of the tree. Once they start growing again in the spring, that root loss can actually kind of shock them awake a little bit, and they'll go ahead and start spreading out those new roots right away. So we typically plant those kinds of trees, but also sometimes do container trees. You got to look out for the girdling roots. That's what that is a picture of up here. You got to make sure those roots, when the tree's planted, aren't kind of spiraling out in a circle. Bare root trees typically do really well, and you don't have to water them as often, but the actual logistics of getting thousands of bare root trees to individuals, keeping the roots moist. It's something we haven't quite tackled yet in our work, something we hope to do more experiments with in the future, but the logistics of, ordering them, keeping them, and then getting them to all the neighborhoods has been kind of challenging so far. But the reason we're planting trees that are so big as well, because seedlings and smaller trees can also do really, really well if you keep them from, grow them from seed or grow them from saplings are very small. It's just more likely, unfortunately, as I know all of you know, there was talk about this a little bit before the presentation started, but deer, right? And our little, it's great. That means that it's an active part of the ecosystem, right? If deer are enjoying our new trees, but also means they're not living to their, full growth and maturity to give us those many benefits that a large tree provides. So for us, that kind of 1 inch caliper size is kind of the sweet spot, both to make a big impact right away, really kind of capture the public imagination, but also is a sweet spot for long-term survivability. We could plant 500,000 small trees, by March if we wanted to, maybe, but not very many of those would live to their, full growth and full size. So that's kind of why we do it the way we do. When we pick what species we're looking for, we are generally picking kinds that are easy. We want trees that are easy to care for, do well in a variety of environments and climates, native species as much as possible, and something that people like. We want to kind of grab attention and have really attractive options for people. So I knew y'all would want to know. So these are some of the most common species we've been planting lately with the Root Nashville campaign. How we do this is through our neighborhood planting captain program, where you are, if you're a captain, you have a certain amount of trees for your neighborhood, and you have 5 species to go with, and first come, first serve within your neighborhood. So this year, you can see we've got kind of understory, smaller species on this top row right here: redbud, sweet bay magnolia, crabapple, and star magnolia. And then a bunch of large canopy trees that do get nice and big: sugar maple and nut all oak, tulip poplar, American elm, red maple, and willow oak. We always make sure to offer at least one type of oak within the 5 species that we offer. And I think next year we're going to maybe even up that to 2 oaks, 2 different kinds for people to choose from. So as you can see from this, they are all native species with the exception of the star magnolia. So that's that 90% we're planting this year. Everything else is native, but that star magnolia. We did some research recently that I'll just touch on very, very briefly about why people like trees, why they said yes to trees. We surveyed people who have recently received trees from us before, private homeowners, and this is their number one thing that they said: why did you say yes to a free tree? These are the answers that they provided. I'll show you the summary. So top 3, fairly evenly spread out. Why did people want a tree? They said number 1 reason was trees provide beauty, but these other 2 reasons were really cited quite often as well, and often even maybe a little bit more than we expected. We kind of expected trees provide beauty, oh, that's going to blow all these other answers out of the water, but actually people cited these other 2 pretty commonly as well: that trees keep people healthy and trees help the environment. But people did note that it was hard to choose one reason. Again, this is what we kind of talked about earlier with, it's amazing that trees provide all these benefits at once. It was hard for people to choose one, just one reason only why they chose to plant a tree. Want to leave you with a couple different ideas for how to get engaged with us and what we're doing with the Root Nashville campaign. So one of those is the neighborhood planting captain program. All of these are, I should say, I know Wild Ones is, kind of, this chapter is for Middle Tennessee, kind of a larger area. These are unfortunately just for Nashville and Davidson County, but if you are in these areas and are interested, would love to talk with you more about it. But this is the program that's getting trees to private property. So you can apply to be a captain on the Root Nashville website. It's not a very difficult application. It's just who you are, what you love about, trees, and why you want to get more trees to your neighborhood, a little bit about your neighborhood, your involvement, and why you want to be a captain. And then if you're accepted into the program, then you have typically between 30 to up to 70 trees. Usually it's 50. And you're allotted those trees, and you say, okay, you've got 50 trees for your neighborhood. Here's the order form link. Here's some flyers. We make some custom flyers for our captains. Go get the word out and tell people to sign up for these free trees. We deliver them straight to people's front yards, straight to people's backyards, wherever they choose to plant them. We just need someone in neighborhoods who can be the kind of point person for the outreach and the kind of grassroots, kind of peer-to-peer conversations with your neighbors. We found it to be so much more successful and beneficial to get trees to neighborhoods to actually have neighbors themselves talk to their own neighbors, instead of us going in and being like, y'all need to plant trees here, even if it's true, right? It's been way more successful when there's somebody actually on the ground in the neighborhood who can help us with that outreach. So we accept applications for this program on a rolling basis, so you can apply at any time. Depending on where we are in the planting season, we may defer your application to the next planting season, but we're always looking for more captains. So would definitely encourage people to look into this. But I also heard at the beginning of the meeting today, some conversations about, bringing plants to a yard sale or putting native plants out at the top of your street. This sounds like primo neighborhood planting captain energy. I'm all here for it. That's basically what the captain does, is just tell their neighbors that trees are available and encourage them to sign up for them. There's a custom link for every neighborhood that has kind of your specific information on it and kind of shows how many trees are remaining for your neighborhood. So we really try to streamline the process and make it as easy as possible for our captains. We tell them you don't need to be a tree expert by any means. We're just looking for people who are enthusiastic about the opportunity and willing to get the word out and tell their neighbors that this is a program available for them. That isn't the only way to get involved with the Root Nashville campaign, though, so I wanted to leave you with a couple of other ideas. I bet everybody here already does this in some way, but even just advocating for trees, talking to your neighbors about trees, not being shy to ask your neighbor, did you know that that's a Bradford pear out in your front yard? Let me tell you why that's, maybe not the best tree, but if you take it down, here's why you should replant. Or if you're planting a tree, tell them what you're doing and why you're doing it. It's a really easy way to just kind of spread the word, is to just advocate for trees kind of in your daily lives. If you have planted trees, or if you're going to plant trees kind of on your own and not through one of our nonprofit partners, definitely encourage you to add those trees to Tree Plotter. We've got a video that shows you how to do so that I can send you all the link to if you're interested. It's also on the Root Nashville website, but we definitely encourage you to join the movement, get your tree added. You can see a little dot in your neighborhood. You get to categorize it as awesome individual when you add your tree to the count. So who doesn't want that? You can also now add your ideas for planting sites within Hub Nashville. If you're not familiar with Hub Nashville, this is where you can report things to the city like potholes or broken streetlights, that kind of thing. There's also now a more positive thing you can report. You can report your ideas for where you'd like to see some trees planted. You can subscribe to our newsletter to keep in the loop about what we're doing. It's called Tree Mail. It's just once a month. You can volunteer with us. We've always got events going on, usually small scale in nature and in neighborhoods is what most of our events are right now. And if you're a social media person, would encourage you to follow along with what we're doing on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. It is not just something that can help keep you in the loop about upcoming opportunities, but really does help us when you like us and when you follow along. So I will pause there and turn it over to Richard and to the group to answer any questions that you might have. I'll stop sharing my screen here in a moment, but I'll drop my email in the chat if anyone wants to follow up afterwards as well. This is also our kind of general inbox for general inquiries. It's just that hello@rootnashville.org. So I will pause there and turn it over for questions.
Okay, well, great, Meg. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I've heard you speak before, so I'm not surprised, but I hope everybody enjoyed that. I'm sure they did. We have a kind of a cozy group, so I think we can dispense with the formality of me reading questions in the chat and just go in order and let the questioner ask the question if he or she would like to. So I think, Paul, you might be up first if you want to take charge.
So I know you said you're not the advocacy group, but are you supporting the advocacy group? And what kind of legislation are they proposing in Nashville and perhaps in the state of Tennessee to both increase the number of trees and increase the number of native plants?
Yeah, so they've done really incredible work over the past few years to pass tree bills within the city, and it had been a long time since tree bills had been passed, so we were out of date. So we're really glad that the National Tree Conservation Corps is doing what they're doing. Some of the most recent ones they have passed is increasing the requirement for what developers are required to plant on new properties. So this was within the past few years. There's something called a tree density unit, or TDU. We used to be way behind other comparable cities. Now we're getting a little bit closer. So that means developers are required to plant or have more tree density on their projects than they did before. So it's definitely a step in the right direction. We still have more to go in that way for sure. Future legislation looks like it will be targeting more preventing tree loss on private properties, which is definitely where we're seeing the most right now. So, more or any restrictions, because there aren't any restrictions right now, but restrictions on removing trees on private property. There's also a very exciting bill that is going to council for its third reading tomorrow, December 7th, which is making a pot of funds available to groups to then use to plant trees on private property. So this is the city kind of stepping up in the Root Nashville campaign and saying like, okay, I didn't mention this, but 94% of Nashville's land is privately owned. So if we are going to meet this goal of restoring our canopy, it's spreading the message that you are a steward of your land. I know this is something Wild Ones believes in, you know, changing the environment. What is it, one yard at a time or something? We're very much for that, and put a tree in that yard, you know, as well. So this, should it pass tomorrow, which it looks like it is going to, this is going to make a huge difference in restoring trees on private property and getting more trees planted there, because we won't have to worry about fundraising, finding the dough to do it. It's going to be a pot of money available that developers are paying into. So it's also coming from the right place, if you ask me. So does that answer your question, Paul? That was probably more than you were looking for.
No, that's perfect.
Okay.
I'm always looking for more, so you can't outdo me.
You come to the right place.
Let's see, Nick, I think you're next up with a question, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask that.
Yeah, it wasn't so much a question as a comment. I'd just like to encourage people, when you're planting trees in Nashville, to remember that, you know, not counting the hills, from the Highland Rim that intrude into Nashville, for like the Warner Parks and such, that most of Nashville, the basin, was considered barrens. You know, trees were, you know, I mean, there were trees, but it wasn't the dense closed canopy forest. You know, it pretty much never has been. And so I want to encourage people to plant trees that are native locally. You know, if you're on a hill, you plant, you know, rock chestnut oak. If you're, you know, flat floodplain over 6-inch deep limestone, a 6-inch deep soil over bedrock limestone. You know, you're planting hackberries and redbuds and, you know, stuff that would naturally be there. You know, just because a species is native to the US or even to the Southeast US, it might not be appropriate for the local environment. A big example I've seen in my mother's neighborhood in Nashville is hollies. You know, even the American holly, the Ilex opaca, if you look at the range distribution map for USDA, there's this, it's solid green over the eastern US, except for this white hole on the Nashville Basin where it does not occur naturally. And, you know, it's just important when we think about ecosystems to sort of not mess them up when we're trying to restore them. That's really sort of my base of my comment.
Absolutely, Nick. And yeah, thank you for adding that. Right tree, right place is what we say all the time in this business. And part of what that means is really looking very carefully at exactly where you are. With oaks in particular, something you can look at is whether it's, you know, upland or lowland, and can kind of figure it out from there. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
And that's an issue that's not unique to trees at all, of course. We have that problem with our own plant sales. We can buy plants, but finding out exactly where they came from is really quite challenging. And so we're looking at improving our local seed collection efforts by partnering with places like Warner Parks, which is a no-pick park. But we're looking at options for partnering with some of these parks and getting permission to do limited plant seed extraction, so that we can know that we're growing locally sourced plants from locally sourced seeds. But even when we order seeds from Brownstone, it's a real issue with there, because I have to call them up and ask them, you know, which of their seed growing lots did they get this from, and sometimes it's Oklahoma or Georgia, but they don't grow much from the Central Basin here in Nashville. So And that's a serious problem. I think we're getting a little bit better, but there's a long way to go. The Georgia Native Plant Society has really upped their program for collecting local seeds for their plant sales, and they're doing a really good job in the metro Atlanta area. Okay, so what's up next here? That was Nick. Lots of thank yous. Yeah, Brad, do you want to, or I mean, Patricia, do you want to expound on your comment?
No, I mean, $2.5 million if this passes the third reading tomorrow night for tree planting and funding. And we're very excited about that for Davidson County. And it's going to be for 1 year and then reevaluated. But Richard, I wondered if you have you had a chance to comment about the acorn collecting and how we're trying to get the native,
Only in our newsletters. It has not come up at a meeting, but yeah, you're welcome to bring that up.
Go for it though. I mean,
Okay.
you might know more than.
Yeah, so there was the White Oak Initiative that the State Forestry Group put out because the white oaks are in decline in the wild. And there are several sources of white oaks where the acorns really just go to waste each year. Vanderbilt University has several white oaks on the Peabody campus. The governor's mansion has a few white oaks, but one in particular had a very productive year, and that's a fenced off area, so turkeys and deer can't get in, and the squirrels are just in squirrel heaven in there, and they can't possibly consume all of the acorns. So we extracted hundreds of pounds of acorns as not we, the wild ones, but as a cooperative group between the Metro Tree Advisory Committee, which several Wild Ones members are on. Meg is on that, Patricia is on that, Michael Duchin is on that, Patty Gertner is on that, and Ann Hughes is on that. And so we're well represented on the Metro Tree Advisory Committee. But it was a joint effort among all Wild Ones and Metro Tree Advisory and anybody else who wanted to help out. So we did collect a lot of acorns, and next year we'll be more organized about it if there's still a decline in the acorns, which we anticipate there will be. And we can help with that effort. And so we'll be putting the word out next year in coordination with the forestry department to get the volunteer groups together for that. Anything you would add to that, Patricia?
Yes, one point is that certainly is collecting a locally, acorn and being able to raise the trees that came from this local area that will be available from the state nursery in about 1.5 years. And this is a real important thing. We also did it at the governor's residence, the Tennessee residence. And I think the white oak acorns were 500 pounds, which equates to about 35 to 50,000 acorns. So that's a lot of acorns, and then they're floated to see if they're viable at the nursery. The ones that float or not, and then they're planted. And anyway, looking forward to having those white oaks and others next in 1.5 years, so we can start putting more of them back into this community.
Right. So back to Nick's point, in a more perfect world, the white oak acorns collected in the Central Basin would be planted in the Central Basin and not the Cumberland Plateau. But we're not down to that level of control yet by any means. So thanks for that comment, Patricia. What's up next? Is there another question I'm not seeing? Okay, so I haven't looked at the membership geographic center and all that kind of stuff in about 1 year, but a year ago, we were going with about 30 to 40% of our membership was in metro government. And then about 20% more was in Williamson County. And then after that, it was pretty well scattered as a Middle Tennessee group. But the point is, we are well represented in Davidson County. So I didn't have any qualms about having a Davidson County specific presentation, because maybe it will inspire some other counties to do the same thing. And so I know Franklin has some fairly aggressive tree ordinances, but Nashville is either catching up or surpassing Franklin now. So, and other areas need to look at beginning tree protection programs beyond, letting homeowners do whatever they want to do and letting developers do whatever they want to do. So Nashville is now, at least on the developer side, gone way past that. And that's a very good thing. And so I was going to ask you, Meg, on the sources in McMinnville, is there any consideration for where they get their seeds for the trees?
I wish there was more, and I hope that it goes in that direction in the future. But we're typically looking for businesses that have the best environmental practices, places that have, things like cover crop in between their tree planting rows. So there isn't as much, erosion and runoff from all the nutrients as well. So we kind of look for, okay, is this business, excuse me, there's a visitor. Is this a environmentally friendly, business? Are they, operating sustainably, and will they cut us a deal? Because we are purchasing so many all at once. We also work with a tree broker, which is a job that exists, believe it or not. We have a fabulous one that we work with who, will kind of say what we're looking for, and this individual goes out and helps us locate the best quality trees for the best price. So we're not tracking them all the way from seed just yet for the ones that we purchase, but definitely kind of hope to do more of that in the future. It's a good talking point and good to communicate with people too.
Yeah. And then what goes into these species selections? I know you talked a little bit about that, but I think you could say a little more.
Yeah, for sure. So it's absolutely a group effort, but the reason we kind of focus on, about 10 different species per planting season is because at the beginning we were offering, up to maybe 40 different choices, which is, maybe the best for having the diversity and for encouraging, different types of trees to be planted, but was a real mess for us to keep up with logistically. We do a couple hundred trees every week from October through March with a very small staff. So we do 2 to 3 neighborhoods every week delivery wise. And so it got real messy for us to have so many different kinds of trees, but we offer, we'll change it every season. So we'll have 10 different native, hopefully all 100% native species, next season, 5 in the fall, 5 in the winter, and we'll continue to do that. That will also make it so that neighborhoods can participate more than once if they'd like. We've had rounds of neighborhood planting captains in the tornado areas, especially where the same neighborhood has maybe participated 3 or 4 times at this point, but they've had, 5 different trees the first round, 5 different species the second, another 5 the third. So kind of can encourage that biodiversity also. But yeah, there's a Root Nashville advisory board that is, members of the city, members of nonprofit groups, and our partners, and some of those kind of species selections are kind of made via group committee by campaign partners.
Great. I see Susan has a question which I missed. Do you want to ask your question, Susan?
I think Nick maybe mentioned a source where I could find out if a tree is really native to the Central Basin, not just somewhere in Tennessee or the Southeast.
Mm-hmm. The Metro Tree Advisory Committee, Patricia, you can speak more to this as the chair, still chair of this illustrious group, has a recommended tree list and prohibited tree list, but it doesn't quite go into the detail about Central Basin or not. And Patricia, you can speak to that more than I can, but it's a really good list of, recommended or not, but it doesn't have that level of specificity. But Patricia, you might know more as well, I bet, Richard and maybe Nick too.
I do know that it's vastly needs updating very, very much. And also there was something else you mentioned, which I can't remember. We can't really say prohibited trees, even though we'd like to. We can just say not recommended. We've been caught on the carpet with that. We can't tell anybody that plant something, but we say not recommended, which anyway, but it's something, a list that needs a lot of work and needs updating, and just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I can speak to
It is,
sources.
it is on the website.
Yeah, I can speak to sources that I use for finding if a plant is native to a given county. And there are three sources that I use. One is the Biota of North America. That's BONAP.org. And they will have range maps for every native species. And I believe it is down to the county level, except in a few states which don't report county level data. But it's the best, and I think the gold standard for determining the native range of a plant. And the
Would
other,
you repeat that?
I'll type it in the chat, but it's BONAP.org. Oh, Joanna beat me to it. Thank you, Joanna. So it is in the chat, and I do get a hard copy of the chat, which I can distribute that information to anyone who's interested. The Tennessee Herbarium website is also a good source, and gosh, that's a button on the top of my browser, and can somebody look that up and type that in? Because I just click the button and kind of forget. It's University of Tennessee website. Thank you again, Joanna. Herbarium.utk.edu. It is in the chat now. And I think everybody knows my last site. That's plants.usda.gov. And when you go to plants.usda.gov, you see a map of the range of the species, but it's just colored in by state. And so in order to get down to county level data, you have to zoom in twice, and that will then get you to county level data. And so it's kind of a difficult question to answer, as what is the native range, because if you look at a tree like the Osage orange, the original native range was a small area in North Texas, southeastern Oklahoma, and maybe a little bit into one more state. But it's now considered native to pretty much the eastern United States because it was such a popular tree. It was hundreds of years ago. It was spread by indigenous people throughout everywhere it would grow for various reasons. But the wood was very hard. The fence, the living fence aspect was used, and then certainly amplified by the settlers. So it's kind of it's hard to define what a native range of a plant is, but just to give you something concrete, you can go to any of those three sites and get approximately the same information.
Okay, thank you.
I find it quite useful, when you're really trying to get down to it. Is it really native to this area? And then within each county, you've got a variety of possibly, level 4 regions. And so, you got so you can get this, you can take this as far as you want, but most of us are comfortable at some mid-level, I think. So, thank you for that question. It's really important to have those tools and know how to use them. Ashley, you popped a question in there. If you're still with us, can you unmute that and tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Sorry, what was that? Is that to me?
Ashley asked a question, and I was inviting her, if she's still with us, to unmute herself. I'm on a tiny little screen here because I'm traveling, and it's kind of hard to there. Okay, yeah, she is still with us.
She's speaking up, but I think it's her microphone isn't working. She says, I can see her trying to talk, but it's not really popping up.
She's not muted, but if I can take over and she can, if she solves her mic problem, jump in. She said, would anyone be interested in advising on specific plantings for a local park revitalization project at Green Hills Park? We have cleared invasives and are ready to select plants. We could take a tour this weekend, say Saturday morning at 10 a.m. And so if anybody would like to do that, let's see, we need to contact each other. You can send me an email, richardhitt@gmail.com, and I can coordinate that with Ashley. And if Ashley wants to drop her email in the chat, that would also work. Yeah, so Green Hills Park, I've been there a couple of times volunteering, and it's a park I never knew about, but it's not far. Well, it's in Green Hills, of course, but it has a really bad Virginia creeper problem, and as most places in that area do, a very bad bush honeysuckle problem. So people have been removing the invasives. Ashley and I have planted some natives, and other people. The president of the Friends group there has also helped out. So, but Ashley is sort of spearheading the project, and so she will keep me posted, and I can put things in the newsletters as needed to invite people to volunteer to go out there. Oh, and Ashley's email is in the chat now. If you want to meet this weekend at 10 a.m. It's by the J.T. Moore School, and it's labeled Green Hills Park on maps. Any other questions? Well, let's thank our speaker, Meg, for a wonderful presentation. We thank you so much and are happy to have had you here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you all. It was a delight and an honor.
Well, you bet.
Look forward to seeing y'all in future meetings from the
All right,
other
thanks
side.
again. Thanks again, Meg. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Hey, Ashley.